This week on the Superhuman Podcast.
In the next few years, you will have call centers where you will have an AI assistant helping them. Not in a few years, but exactly in a few months, actually.
It was all to drive that same mindset of, I need to increase my bottom line performance.
It's just that how do we empower the people that are working with us in order to solve those new problems?
Where do you see the relationship that consumers have with their telco in the next few years?
AI has a lot of knowledge, it has a lot of content, but doesn't have context.
Do you see a return to those big capex days for telcos where we're going back to more infrastructure investment?
So one of the things that we need to be careful about is we know where generative AI can do good. We still haven't discovered where it can go wrong.
Habib is a data scientist and AI leader across New Zealand's telco industry, as well as an executive council member at New Zealand AI Forum. Today we take a look at the use cases of AI across the telco industry and how AI will touch everyone on a daily basis. Thank you for joining us, sir, and welcome.
Thank
Love
you.
our studio, isn't it great?
It's a wonderful studio.
Isn't it great? We thought you'd get you onto the podcast because we've got something in common, which is not the fact that we're both working in artificial intelligence, but the fact we both work in telco as well. And I actually crafted my engineering teeth on 2G, 3G networks back in the early 2000s. And I stayed close to the engineering of technology in the telco space for the last couple of decades, which has seen telcos shift from purely speeds and feeds all the way through to being cloud providers, security providers, and now with the emergence of AI, I imagine we're going to see a whole extension to that as well. So thanks for joining us. I thought we'd start with telcos itself and where you see the opportunity with AI in the telco sector as a whole.
Thank you. Thanks. That's a wonderful question as well. And I think, within the telco sector, if you see, there are lots of other consultancies and other agencies are looking at which sector will be impacted the most from generative AI coming in. And one of the biggest areas that they're looking towards is the telco sector. And on an average, the improvements that they're claiming in terms of productivity or in terms of EBITDA is around 13 to 20%. Really. And there are multiple areas within the telco. One is the efficiency of the employees themselves as well. But at the same time, if you want to focus on certain areas, for example, call centers, that's going to go through a big revolution in the near future. Today, we have call centers where it's being handled by humans alone. In the next few years, you will have call centers where you will have an AI assistant helping them. Not in a few years, but exactly in a few months, actually. And maybe in a few years, you might have AI actually running a lot of the calls, and you have a human supervisor on top of it.
That's actually an interesting point. As you look at the call center, which you're right, historically and currently is human populated and is human driven, then throughout the 90s and 2000s, there was like a labor arbitrage component of that. It's like, okay, I'm going to outsource to the Philippines or outsource to India. And it was all to drive that same mindset of, I need to increase my bottom line performance. With Gen AI, essentially, and I'll use the word replacing because it is the soul-crushing work, which can be call center work. That impacts two things. It's giving the telco, in this instance, what they want, which is greater GP and improved EBITDA because their cost base is reduced. But also you're impacting a labor market overseas, which ethically becomes a bit of a balance, right? Because you're not employing Kiwis, you're also not employing anyone overseas, and you're driving in technology, which impacts quite a few places. So,
I think that's, if you look at generative AI and AI in total, there's always been that fear that, okay, it's going to replace jobs. I think that's kind of a different way to look at it. Sam Altman in one of his interviews was asked that, now that you have solved the world's biggest problem, what are you going to do next? And he said that, the world always has problems, new problems. When we discovered agriculture, we thought we solved all the problems. Then disease came. When we discovered medicine, then other problems came in as well. So I don't think that the problems will go away. There will be new problems for us to solve. It's just that how do we empower the people that are working with us in order to solve those new problems and be ready to solve those new problems. So it will be more around training your staff so that they can do much more other interesting stuff as well,
100%.
and providing them that opportunity along with it.
So let's talk about AI competency in relation to call center, for example. Call center is a very strong use case for telco because of the amount of inbound calls that telcos get around support, changing plans, etc. And I think it's fair to say the internet kind of helped with a lot of that. Mobile apps helped with a lot of that to deflect the work that of a human at that point. Is AI competent enough in 2024 to be able to actually handle the load?
Definitely not, because AI has a lot of knowledge, it has a lot of content, but doesn't have context. And the context that humans bring in right now is, would say, much more than AI could actually handle, or at least it's growing to handle immediately. In this case. But not now, but maybe 2-3 years down the line, definitely it might start learning the context as well over there. So it's not something that it's not going to handle, but for the time being, it can act more as an assistant rather than as a main pilot over there.
So in terms of a co-pilot for call center technicians or call center engineers or call center staff, it'd be how do they get that work done faster or more accuracy, which is great. But then you kind of look at the development of AI agents based on these AI technologies, which are going to be focused on extracting that context from the individual. So I call up a telco, hey, look, I'm not happy with my plan, and the ability for the agent to negotiate a better plan, that's likely where we're going to be in the course of the next, probably even 6 to 12 months as those things come up. But that's engineering work, right? At that point, you're designing experiences for the user as opposed to leaning on generic AI, which is kind of where we're at this point in time. Super proficient and capable large language models, but you kind of need to tell them what to do.
Yes.
Moving from, I guess, reactive AI to this more proactive agent-based conditional. And that's going to be the tipping point, I think, for call center application.
That's true. But at the same time, there'll be a lot of testing and a lot of thorough evaluation that will be required as well. So one of the things that we need to be careful about is we know where generative AI can do good. We still haven't discovered where it can go wrong. And that's one of the things where the more mature evaluation, testing, and components are added over there, till that time, we'll say it can't be handed off completely to AI over there. And that journey will definitely come, but it will all depend upon how you go towards that journey and what processes you follow in order to reach over there.
Do you see the telecommunications industry leading the pack in terms of applying this technology within call centers, or are they other shining examples of call center application that the telco industry in New Zealand is leaning on and go, okay, we need to be like the insurance industry, or we need to be like the medical industry to kind of pull that thinking in?
I think in terms of the risk factors, telco industry has a comparatively lower risk, and that's why I would say they would be leading the pack in that case. Other industries like insurance, healthcare, and so on could also lead, but there's a larger amount of risk involved in that. Now, it also depends upon the risk appetite and the legislation that is being framed across the different parts of the world in order to lead some of them. So I think telcos are much more in a safer space to test it out and lead the pack, and then show and come up as a shining example for the other industries.
Which actually, that's a fascinating thought process to go through, that the high impact areas, such as, say, healthcare, where there are lives at risk, but also lives to be saved, is likely to be a laggard in the adoption of this technology because of the risk of getting it wrong, but also slower to get the benefits of getting it right, which is an interesting shift of how far you lean on that risk curve.
I agree, and I think that depends upon the leadership within those areas and trying to see what are the safe ways in which we can start learning about this technology, introducing it to our people, and then start building teams around it. Because unless you dip your toes into it, you will not be able to actually understand whether the water is hot or cold.
That's right. That's right. So internationally, New Zealand's got a good corpus of telcos which have been supported internationally, and some that are New Zealand owned. On the global basis, who are you seeing as really leading the way within the telecommunications sector around the use of AI? And if they're in New Zealand, that's great. But on an international basis, you're like, okay, cool, the Germans are doing a great job here, or there's use cases within Spain or the UK. Like, what does good look like?
I think one of the examples that I've read a lot in the news and I'm aware of, or there must be other ones as well, is the Koreans actually. Forgot the name of the Korean company. It's the largest telecom Korean company, and they were quite innovative in the sense that they've come out with an app which they call as a dot, and that app basically what it does is it's kind of chat gpt for their customers, and they're providing that as a service to the customer because they say that so one of the applications over there is for any small medium enterprise business, recording calls and creating a summary is a big task. So on that app you can record the call as you're having the conversation, and then it will create a summary. It's linked to your emails. You can copy it, send it through your emails to the customer effectively, so that you are also aware of what the conversation was. They are also aware, and it's a you can record it.
That's fascinating because the use of calls as a medium must overall be declining because of the flip to like WhatsApp calls or FaceTime and things that the telco has been used as a transit network as opposed to like owning the first party call. So that's an interesting approach because actually it's perfect if you own the call. And it'd be interesting to kind of look at the stats of, well, how many people actually make phone calls?
I think that's the other thing. If you're looking at more the business calls and so on, like even today, I get most number of business calls related to that. Personal calls, yes, WhatsApp and those ones are much more the same. If I'm not reachable or if it's a more international calls, then yes, WhatsApp and those ones are much more easily this thing. But to be honest, if you are trying to build a relationship or something like that, calls are still a very strong medium for that.
Yep.
And to be honest, the main idea here was that the service itself is quite useful.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
Yeah. But once you are able to use it, you can integrate it with other areas as well and see, okay, for example, WhatsApp, can we integrate with that and try to use it on top of it?
Yeah. Well, that's a fascinating use case. So that's what's happening in Korea. The Europeans have generally led the way in terms of, I guess, the big moves and shakes within who's buying who and what coalitions are happening across MVNO networks, etc. Anything from Europe that you're seeing?
From Europe, I think one of the things that we have seen is they have actually collaborated with one of the few companies in Dubai and Etisalat and so on, and they're trying to make their own large language model. Now, this is a very telco specific large language model that they're looking towards, just like ChatGPT, but for telcos effectively. They have invested around, I think, 200 million or $300 million as well as a combination. Good idea, and they are trying to move into that, but I'm not really sure how much value it might generate, because in the world of pre-trained models where you can already extract a lot of value from these pre-trained models, why would you want to create one of your own specifically for that?
And the intent of a model being built specifically for telco is to have a more competent model for call center and or other tasks, or is this outside of?
It might be. So to be honest, they haven't released the details,
Right.
but I think we'll say more or less initially for call centers, but we'll say other parts of the business as well.
In terms of the use cases that you've seen in Korea and your experience in the telecommunications industry, where do you see the relationship that consumers have with their telco in the next few years? That may be AI related, it may not, but there is quite a lot of indicators that people's relationships with their telco now is nowhere near as strong as it used to be. What's your thoughts about how that kind of goes over the next couple of years?
I think next couple of years there is an opportunity for telcos to expand into the AI space and start looking at how can they start providing AI services on top of their telco services. We went through that journey where telcos were initially just providing a source of communication, right? Then we'll say we moved into the tech space. Now there's an opportunity for moving into the AI space as well. So how do telcos capture that opportunity? That will be the big question over there.
Is it fair to say that the power of telecommunication in companies over the last couple of decades is changing based on the fact that they still really are the custodians of the pipe? They don't own what's transiting the pipe. And do you see a power shift over time of, say, the social media providers or the likes of Apple becoming more seen as telcos than they are as just technology providers today?
I think might be a bit different over there. The reason for that is, yes, I agree that telcos are basically seen as the managers of the pipe, but they are trying to innovate within each of these spaces as well, providing more additional services. So when cloud came in, they started providing cloud services. Similarly with AI, the example of the Korean company, they are now saying that, okay, how do we basically collaborate with some of these big AI cloud providers and then start looking into providing AI services as well. The main benefit that telcos have is that they are more local based as well. They're more closer to the customer as well. So there's an opportunity for them to say, we are not just going to basically sell you a service. We are partnering with you for a service so that the customers can be seen as partners, not just as, would say, customers.
Yeah. Which is again is an interesting dynamic, because the birth of 2G, 3G technologies, and then moving into LTE, and then now where we're at with 5G tech, it's been a way to get the consumer the connection to the network and provide services back to the handset and back to the user, and then that's extended into, okay, well, there's a business application for this technology. It's not just about the individual. And when I started my telecommunications journey, it wasn't really thought of as a business tool. It was a case of, well, of course, business people need to stay connected, but you were using consumer-grade handsets, consumer-grade plans. Over time, I think it's evident that the next level of services that telcos are offering are all focused on business. And therefore, where do you see it right now in terms of how much of a, say, percentage that the telcos are beholden to the consumer versus beholden to business? Because I think if you were to look at a telco in 2024, actually they're a business solutions provider. It's email, cloud infrastructure, data centers. Now they're moving into AI call management and etc. I mean, that's a departure away from 20 years ago, when it was a case of you got 30 text messages and half an hour's worth of calls. So is it fair to say that as they go forward, the telcos are going to be far more business focused than consumer focused?
I think the way the nature business is also changing very fast. So this was the other conversation we were having with a group of friends, was that we used to have $1 billion companies made up of 100 or say 1,000, 10,000 individuals. Last decade, we had a few companies where there were only 100 individuals that were having $1 billion company, or was it?
That was right. Twitter, right? I think they had 100 staff and they were $1 billion. Yeah.
And it might be that in the next 1 year or so, we might have a single person $1 billion company effectively as well. So the nature of business is also changing very fast. Earlier, we used to have customers which were more consumers and business which was very much focused on business. But those two worlds are also merging very closely. So no telecom can afford to actually just say, oh, we focus on business and we not forget the consumer. They have to be addressed at the same time over there, because the experiences that the consumer has over here will also reflect back into the business area arena as well.
Interesting. The telecommunication industry has, not to put the industry into buckets, but originally was seen as infrastructure organizations where huge amounts of capital investment, build networks, build core infrastructure, build tower networks, and then operate those, and essentially get return on infrastructure investment. It feels to me that over time there's less building of infrastructure and more leaning on third-party services to satisfy the consumer. So reselling Microsoft Azure, reselling AWS, and leaning on, in this instance, large language model providers to provide these services through. Do you see a return to those big CapEx days for telcos where we're going back to more infrastructure investment? Or do we feel now that their telco is a conduit for others to get their services into their portfolio of clients?
I think in today's world, telcos play a much more important role, and the infrastructure investment will be directing everything, but will be at least important enough. See, the main thing is that today we are looking at a lot of consumption of data from all spaces. And in order to sustain that, telcos will need to keep on investing in the infrastructure and seeing that, okay, what's the next level of value that they can add using that. But at the same time, you can't just rely on infrastructure itself. you have to start investing in other services that you can provide on top of it, of the infrastructure. So somebody told me that if you're just kind of providing the pipe to move the data from here to here, that's good. But if you add some value on top of it, that could be a differentiator for you and can help you keep the customer for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And what is that value that you can add on top of it? That's what telcos need to start defining for themselves. They've been doing that through different other promotions that they have, but it could be some other services which can help improve the lives of the people as well.
Yeah. Well, not directly linked to network infrastructure from a telco perspective, but more down at the handset level. So Apple have recently released the fact that they're making some big moves within AI. What's your thoughts of what the future of the handset looks like and the experience of a handset now that AI is being infused into that customer experience from the actual handset providers, not necessarily the network providers?
I think what the handset providers need to start thinking about is that this is my thinking as well, is how does your handset act as an assistant, not just I would say a tool for you to do the work. So how can you provide AI which can book meetings for you, which can book places for you, book your holiday, next holiday, and things like that. If it can do that, then it might be a bit revolutionary, and you will see it as a companion and a much more stronger companion over there. So I think the focus will now shift from whether the handset is my companion or the AI within my handset is my companion over there. And does that AI companion live on all the devices that I interact with? Whether it's my laptop, whether it's my phone, whether it's something else, whatever that might be.
And you'd be looking at Apple and saying, well, they're almost one of the biggest custodians of access to everything that could be automated. The device has all of everyone's email clients on it, albeit those applications are encrypted, unless you're using iCloud, for example. And the footprint of applications that Apple could open up in terms of if you have an Apple App Store loaded that you can pass those off into the AI would be pretty powerful. But there does seem to be this compartmentalization of data. Who owns the access to the app and who owns the access to the data seems to be winning the race. Google, obviously, are the biggest custodian of data across the planet when it comes to access to search. And I'm just really interested to see where this kind of settles out, because I don't think there can be one player that could win this. But then should there be one player that wins this for essentially providing companion services? I don't know.
I think what it might be is that in certain areas, that one companion might win for a certain period of time. So Microsoft has all the services regarding Office, right? So if you are a business which is using Microsoft Office apps and you're able to use Microsoft Copilot, it's going to be wonderful for you because you don't have to worry about this data over here or this data over here. It can merge much more quickly. So app access and data access, if they are merged, it will be much more easier for those organizations to make a footprint over there. So that's undeniable. In that case.
Or if you look at the extensibility of those AIs, it's going, okay, well, how do we open up the equivalent of an AI permissions gateway so one app can talk to another under like a permissions structure, which is kind of exactly where you'd need to go, right?
Yes. And I think that will come, but it will come a bit slower. Initially, most of these organizations will start building those walls, and there will be some regulatory authority will say that, well, if you're building those walls, it's not helping other organizations to actually penetrate and learn more from it. So you need to close down those walls.
Interesting that everything we're talking about here in relation to companions is not new technology. I've had Siri on my iPhone for the past, I think, probably 5 or 7 years. 100% not a companion in my eyes. I've had an Alexa at home. I've got the Alexa app on my phone. They've just not cut it. And whether that's due to lack of integration or lack of the ability for me to trust them, I don't know. But they seem very capable. Like in terms of an input output, they're very capable. I've just never got to the point of actually trusting the fact that, and it's not consciously. I'm just this is easier to do it myself than it is to rely on trying to set Alexa up to work, for example. Bearing in mind Siri and Alexa from Amazon were ahead of their time, do you see a renaissance of that input-output methodology of going back to voice commands, etc., but powered by better technologies from the likes of Meta or OpenAI, for example?
I think definitely that's the case. See, when Siri and Alexa came in, everybody had a bit of fascination, and that fascination led to a large scale adoption of these things. But then people started seeing that I can only use it for this much. I can't use it for beyond that. And for example, my daughter, she's 3 years old. She still struggles to say ask Alexa a lot of things. But now with time, it might improve and maybe able to understand. Okay, when she's saying something, it might be able to interpret it better. With the other major thing is that with Chat GPT and the other large language models, earlier Siri, Alexa still felt a bit robotic. You had to follow a strict set of commands, and it used to only follow that. It didn't really go beyond its scope. With large language models like ChatGPT and OpenAI, and one from Amazon and other ones as well, uh, it's become much more human-like. And when things become more human-like, we start responding much more better to them. We start interacting with them more effectively, and we start asking them more questions and relying more on them.
I think the long form nature of the models now is just building significant trust. I mean, Alexa's great for telling jokes. I'm not going to use it for that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Tell me a joke. What's the weather? Hey Alexa, play something on Spotify. That's the most interaction we've got now. But with the work that we've done with OpenAI's Whisper, for example, creating super long form content, podcast-like content, having the script created by GPT-4 and then Whisper narrate scripting, you're like, okay, we're on the verge of this AI content generation window, which is going to be fascinating for the AI to turn around and say, well, this is everything that's going on in your life today, Dave, and all the stuff you've forgotten to do, which, to be honest, I can't quite wait for that moment. And going back to telco, what does that mean for how you infuse those capabilities into the telco revenue stream, and making sure that the industry continues to add value other than the speeds and feeds and the pipes? Because they're sat on a pretty significant data set when you look at the telcos, essentially human movement. They know where everyone is at any one time, pretty much.
I think more than the human movement, it's more about the connection that you have with your customers, the kind of what to say, the kind of knowledge you have that okay, what does the customer need? That's the most important bit over there. And if you can look at that and try and when once you're interacting with those customers and the reach over there, it can make a huge difference in that case. So, for example, if you are providing and I think one of the other differences is that earlier we were very focused on the customer's entertainment. Most of the things that we telcos used to incorporate along with their plans was more entertainment based. The future lies that okay, how can we enter their work lives as well? And work lives are significantly much more value based. So if you can define the right value for them, then you can make a big impact.
Well, they're also work environments are non-uniform, as in every company has different operating procedures, different compliance processes, etc. So it is infinitely more complex, but it's also work is a source of joy for many people.
Yes.
Work is also could be draconian, painful, stressful, and can be a point of pain for a lot of people. And removing that drudgery there's a huge opportunity to redo that, and helping people remove the soul-crushing work that can exist, right? But this has happened throughout all technology revolutions. When we essentially, machines came stronger than humans, we lifted all of that workload and put it into machines. We're going through that renaissance now of, okay, well, if an AI could do half of my job, is that a good or a bad thing? And if that work is bringing you no joy, and you still are needed in an organization to apply more strategic thinking or more creative thinking, then there's a huge wellness factor that comes from the application of this tech.
And I think, there is other things which are also unanswered as well in that space. So, for example, a lot of graphic designers, they are, I would say, currently facing a big challenge because they're saying that, and this is one of the interviews that I heard was, we are being reduced to prompt engineers rather than actually, one of the graphic designers said, I used to get a lot of joy from creating graphic designs, but now I'm being reduced to a prompt engineer because I have to just create a prompt and then try to push stuff out rather than actually getting joy out of creating something new. What does the world mean to them? And there might be a completely different industry where you can say, well, this is AI generated art, this is completely human generated art, this holds more value. But you need to then create systems around it to track it as well, to say that, okay, how do we prove that it's completely human generated? How do we know that, okay, it has what has been done, what effort has been pushed in over there, managing those clicks and everything? That might be a completely different system coming in.
There's numerous things that I think will be navigated over the next few years as people that essentially have got mainstream crafts are likely to move to more boutique craft experiences. And the markets for that change. There's definitely a market for, there's still a market for now. Craft beer, which took a huge, a huge uptake in popularity after the major, alcohol manufacturers came in and just washed us all out with really bad beer. It's going to happen across multiple industries, I think. But what the future holds will be exciting, and we don't wholly know what it's going to be. And I think it's up to individuals like yourself to help shape that. So from a superhuman perspective and my perspective, I want to thank you for joining. It's been really insightful to get your take on telco, beer, and everything else that we've covered today. But Habib, I want to thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
We'll put links in below to follow you on LinkedIn and all the other social platforms. But we'll get you back on again in the future if that's okay. And we'll follow the progress that the telco industry is making.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.